biblical symbolic significance of Mary. Now, it's interesting because when it comes to Mary, there's a big difference between, of course, the Protestant and Catholic view of Mary. The Catholic view of Mary, of course, they have this elaborate whole concept built up around her. You know, the Marian dogmas, Queen of Heaven, and praying to her, and all. It's just this elaborate concept. And then Protestants say nothing about her. A lifetime of growing up in a Baptist church, and you know how much they mention Mary? Comes up once a year around Christmas. The virgin birth. That's it. Done. As far as Protestant theology goes, Mary could have just dropped over dead right after she gave birth to Jesus for as much as significance as she has. I mean, she could have just, I don't know, divorced Joseph a year later and taken off hitchhiking across the country. It doesn't matter. She's totally irrelevant. They don't care what she did. She could have fallen over dead. She's got no relevance to anything, which is a pretty big contrast to the Catholic point of view. So what's going on here, and what is the actual biblical stance? Like, I'm not getting into the Catholic theology yet here. What does the Bible say about Mary? Well, she's there. Yeah, there's the virgin birth, and a couple mentions later. Where, again, this is where Protestants get their point of view, though. They say, well, she's not really mentioned a whole lot, so why should they think about her a whole lot? Well, let's look at the context here. There's a habit in Protestant circles to see Bible stories as just that. They're a series of stories. We know about the Garden of Eden. We know about Noah and the flood, Abraham, Moses. There's the Exodus, and it's cool stories. Supernatural events happen, and maybe if you have a really insightful pastor in your church, they'll give you some good moral lessons here and there along the way, derived from the stories. And if you ever talk to more of a theologian, they'll draw connections here and there, right? They'll talk about the part in Genesis about the where God says something about the crushing the head of the serpent. That's like a preview of Jesus. They'll draw occasional connections here, but there's some things they kind of stop when it comes to Jesus, and you might say that's enough, right? Okay, we'll get into that later, but we're trying to figure out, where's Mary fit in here? Are Catholics just inventing stuff whole cloth out of just making it up? Or is there anything biblically substantial about her significance? So, let's start there in Genesis. Okay, we have Adam and Eve sin, and then God makes that comment about the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent stuff, and even Protestants will agree that this is like a mentioning of Jesus. This is an early prophecy of how Jesus will be born and crush the head of the serpent. He'll defeat Satan. And Jesus, of course, talks about how he is the new Adam. Through the first Adam, sin came into the world, and through the second Adam, man will be redeemed. So what's that got to do with Mary? Well, it said it was the seed of the woman who would crush the head of the serpent. Jesus was born of a woman. Again, one of those ways in which the virgin birth is significant. For whatever reason, God chose to be born, physically born into the world. And, from the very beginning, he said it was the seed of the woman who crushed the serpent. So from the very beginning, God was going to be born of a woman to then crush the head of the serpent. Well, who's that woman? Jesus was born of a woman. That was Mary. So there you go. There's a parallel from Eve to Mary. And of course, if you've heard Catholics talk about this, they've made that comparison about Mary being the new Eve. Jesus was the new Adam. Sin came into the world through first Adam. Jesus brought redemption through being the second Adam, kind of symbolically here. And so in this symbolic parallel, though, so you look, where did sin come from, though? In the story of Adam and Eve, it wasn't Adam by himself. It was Adam with Eve. And if you remember what happened, the serpent said to Eve, if you eat of this fruit, you will become like God. And it was for sake of becoming like God that Eve thought, hey, wow, I want that. She took the fruit. And so it was this power, this ambition for power to subvert God's will. God told her, she knew God told her not to eat that fruit. But for the sake of having power like God, she disobeyed God and took the fruit. Interestingly, though, despite her doing this first, God still says it was through Adam that sin entered the world. Interesting little phenomenon there. So, in the parallel, if Jesus is paralleling himself to the first Adam, and he's in the second Adam is removing sin from the world, well, Mary is in the role of the new Eve. And just like it was the first Eve got ambitious and wanted power and defied God, well, what did Mary do? When an angel comes to her and says she's been chosen to be the mother of Jesus, she says, may the Lord do with me as He wills. She submits to God. She says, okay, God, I'll do whatever you need me to do. In other words, she does the opposite of what Eve did. So Mary does the opposite of what Eve does. And she does this first. She does this before Jesus is born. See how this works? Eve did something first, and then Adam brought sin into the world. Mary does something first, and then Jesus was born and redeems the world. Now, let's be clear. I know some people are very sensitive to this subject, so I'm not saying that therefore it was, Mary saved the world, okay? But she had a role. She had a role, okay? She wasn't the Redeemer, but God chose to use her as the mother of Jesus. He chose to give her this role, and she played her part in a opposite parallel to what Eve did. Eve was ambitious and sinned, and Mary was submissive and obedient, and therefore, she played her role in Jesus redeeming the world. So there we go. We got first parallel. She's her role as the new Eve. And then we also have this parallel of, well, there's the idea of her just being the mother of Jesus. Jesus was born as a son of David. He's born into the bloodline. The bloodline of the king. And the way Jewish culture worked, if you were the mother of the king, that means you're the queen. Right? So by choosing to be born as the king of the Jews, he was making Mary queen, just by the legal law of how it works. That's just legalism there. So she is the mother of Jesus. Jesus is God. That's why she's called Mother of God. Again, not saying that she's giving Christ his divinity. No, she's giving Christ his humanity as a human being born. So, man, just by being born, by choosing to be born, he's making her Mother of God. He's making her queen because he's a king. And that's how the law works. And he gives her this parallel role to how if he's the new Adam, then she's kind of like the new Eve. Okay, we're just talking symbology here right now, okay? There's another major parallel here, because in the Old Testament, when there was the law of Moses. When they came to the Promised Land, they were given the law of Moses, and this is of course the first covenant, right? And of course, this leads to the Ark of the Covenant. And now, if you've heard Catholics talk about this, you've probably heard before where they try to compare Mary to the Ark of the Covenant. And when I first heard that, of course, I thought, well, that's kind of strange. But stop and think about this, okay? The first covenant, he established a earthly kingdom, and they gave them the law. The law was put inside a golden box. Now, this box is just a box, okay? The box was not held up to be God. Okay, they didn't make a statue. They built a golden box, and there were statues on this box, statues of angels. They didn't bow to the box, to the ark. They didn't say the ark was God. They didn't say the ark was a picture of God. It was a very, very significant object, and it held within it, what it had in it, had the staff, and had the tablets of the Ten Commandments on it. So inside this box was the Word of God. And you say, well, it's just a symbol. Okay, well, this golden box, this symbol that God had them build, they built it as a direct command from God. It was very significant to God. Whatever you want to say about the ark, biblically speaking, There were a lot of rules. How do you handle the ark correctly? And if you didn't handle the ark correctly, you could die. There were people who they were. There's a story when the ark they were carrying the ark on a wagon, and the wagon was tipping over. And someone reaches up and touches it to hold it, stop it from falling over. That should have been a good thing, right? He's trying to protect the ark from falling over, but they weren't supposed to touch the ark. They weren't even supposed to be carrying it in a wagon. They were mistreating the ark, and that guy dropped dead. If you mishandle this symbol, you drop dead. What else did they do with the ark? Well, it's surrounded by miraculous activity. They would carry it into to water, and the water would part, and they'd walk through. And when enemies would capture the ark, crazy things would happen. They might get cancer, or their idols would fall over, and things like that. I mean, it's just like God protected this ark through miracles all the time. So it was this golden, shiny, pretty symbol that had within it the written word of God. Now, with Jesus, even Protestants agree that Jesus was like a new covenant. That's why we call the New Testament the New Testament. Right? Something changed when Jesus arrived. There was a change to how God's relating to His people. First, it was just the law, and it was just the physical kingdom of Israel, and now it's Jesus, and now it's a spiritual kingdom. That's the whole premise of Christianity. So it's a new covenant. Well, so when you think of Mary as the Ark of the New Covenant, like, well, Mary carried within her Jesus. She literally had Jesus in her body. And what's Jesus? Well, they say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And we say, well, the Word was Jesus. Jesus is the Word. And Jesus is the Word incarnate. Okay, well, it incarnated through Mary, who carried Jesus in her body. So if Jesus is the Word, then Mary carried the Word in her body. So the physical, written on stone Word of God was carried inside a physical stone golden box. That was, a very powerful symbol that God protected, and all sorts of supernatural things surrounded it. And Mary, well, the living Word of God was carried inside a living human being. So if God had all these miracles, all this power associated with the ark, why would He not maybe have something significant surrounding Mary? She's actually a living being and not just a box. So yeah, that's part of where that parallel comes from there. And an interesting little side note, the ark disappeared. Unless Indiana Jones found it and hid it inside a warehouse somewhere, we don't know where the ark is. There's no one has any proof of where the ark is. And as it happens, no one knows where Mary is either. Catholic belief is about the Assumption, but even if you don't believe in the Assumption, even staunch critics of the Assumption of Mary, they can't find any proof of where her body is. None of the early church has any record. She just disappears. She's presumed dead, but there's no relics, there's no tombs, no records. So even before you get into, modern Catholic belief with the apparitions or anything like that, there is a strong symbolic parallel between the Ark Covenant and Mary. And when you see the way God treats the symbols, how much more so would He treat a living symbol? And also keep in mind that, again, back to the very idea of just being the mother of God, it's the law of Moses that says you're supposed to honor thy father and mother. And just by choosing to be born, God arranged it that Jesus was going to be born. He's making Mary His mother. Why would God do that? And then just to break His own law where it says you're supposed to honor thy father and mother? It would be very disrespectful to His mother to deny her legally appropriate role as, Queen of Heaven, or to denounce Him as His own mother. So she's mother of God because Jesus is God. She gave birth to Him, and Jesus is king, and she's the mother of Jesus, so therefore she's queen. That's just how the law works. So by Jewish law, she is Queen of Heaven. By virtue of the virgin birth, she's mother of God. By Jesus' own expression of Himself being the second Adam, she's in the role of the new Eve. And for Jesus establishing the new covenant, she's in the role of being the new ark. And again, just look at the Bible. How does God treat His symbols? God doesn't do this stuff randomly. The Bible stories are not just random things that happen. He's orchestrating a big kind of a cohesive theme here. And when he establishes something, you should pay attention. So let's go back to the original point. Protestants say nothing about Mary. They don't even acknowledge her as theologically significant. Catholics make a big deal out of her. Just think about it slowly here. What role is she playing in the Bible? Who's got the more biblically appropriate response? That Mary is nothing? She's totally irrelevant? Or that she's kind of a big deal? And, I'll talk more about the explicit Marian dogmas later, but we're talking about just biblical symbology here. So, from a biblical point of view, is Mary kind of important, or is she no big deal at all?